Welcome, everyone. Here we are, another episode of ShiftED podcast coming to you. I'm out of Laval, reaching down south into the great city of Montreal to bring in CEO of Digital Moment, Indra Kubicek, who is Digital Moment, national charity. And Indra's been the CEO there for quite some time. And we're going to kind of dive in all about coding for our kids. I'll tell you a little bit. Well, Indra will tell you a little bit about the services that they offer and the amazing programs that they offer at Digital Moment. And we're obviously going to talk a lot about AI in this as well as we go through. Indra, thanks so much for taking some time to join this podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. Yeah, I can share a little bit about Digital Moments. So we're nationwide digital literacy charity, bilingual, focused on ensuring that every young Canadian has equal access and opportunity to important digital skills. We have reached over 900,000 young people and trained over 32,000 educators. We work both in the school system, which is a large part of our services, is really supporting educators. Without educators having the confidence, the tools, and the capabilities to really be working day in and day out with their students, we're not going to create the sustainable change we need. So we work within the school systems, but we also work in informal other learning environments where young people love to play and learn and thrive. And so from libraries to community centers, we work through volunteers. We have a large-scale volunteer network of volunteers that are teaching coding clubs with younger kids. We are the Canadian partner to the Raspberry Pi Foundation for that Code Club initiative. And our more recent addition to our services is a teen program called a Social Innovation Lab. So we are working with teens in more of a deep dive accelerator type environment program where they learn about entrepreneurship, social impact, and how to actually build and create technology that hopefully serves our communities, our wider cities, our country, and people that we care about. So we're trying to make them really think about why they would want to build technology and what they want to put in the world. And so, yeah, very excited to be here and have a chat about, as you said, the hot topic of the moment, AI.
Totally. And maybe before we hop into that, I always love kind of a backstory, a little bit of how you came to where you are now here today. And I mean, we know technology accelerates everything, it seems. I mean, even with AI, they're saying the turnover now is about 7 months, 6 months. Like it's so fast. We are not fast. Humans grow slowly. We develop over time. And
Absolutely.
some of those moments brought you to Digital Moment that you could share with us.
Yeah. So how did I end up here? Because I am definitely not the digital computer science software engineer background at all. So I actually, by accident, as many people might say, fell into entrepreneurship in my early 30s by deciding I wanted to build a solution to a problem I saw in the world, which is usually how entrepreneurs get started. So my career is totally different. I am a chartered accountant. I went to business school. I moved from Vancouver to London, UK, not London, Ontario for the Canadians, and worked in the finance world and was quite disillusioned with climbing the corporate ladder and all of that. And so I, on a whim, quit my job. I have volunteered in some education organizations in Africa and was really looking at more grassroots social change movements, did a public policy master's, and then decided to build something completely different, which was a marketplace for healthy yoga holidays. So I'm passionate about yoga. I trained as a yoga teacher. This was in 2012. And if you wanted to actually build a website of a marketplace at that time, you actually needed to know how to program and code. So there were no off-the-shelf Wix, all of this kind of new technology that exists. You really need to know what you were doing, or you needed to have someone who did. So off I went on this journey in my early 30s and very quickly felt completely out of water, realized here I am with all my whatever degrees, education, multinational, international career, and I can't build this thing I want to build, and I don't feel confident at all to really do this. And how is this the case? And why didn't I learn this at school? And even more so looking at the education system, realizing, gosh, like it still hasn't changed 15 years later. And here we are. And this is now almost essential building block literacy for any business, regardless of what you're doing. And so I found some young women in London at the time who had just started an organization called Code Club, which was the volunteer coding clubs, joined them. And they were scaling like crazy. It was pretty new, amazing mission, joined them, and then helped bring us into the fold of merging with the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Met Kids Go Jeunesse, that was here in Canada as part of building an international network, and eventually came back here to Montreal. So it was a little long story to get there, but it was really
fascinating. Like, I love it too. Yeah, totally. Well, I think it's a great example too that, I mean, all the education in the world, and I'm not bashing education. I think that it's important, but oftentimes education overlooks that skill development, right? And kind of like when you were faced, so I would need a website. I don't know how to do that, and it requires a skill base kind of to, even just find somebody, or like, who do I know? How could I collaborate? How can I, like critical, all the stuff that comes in that we so desperately need our kids to embody as they head out into this craziness. I guess, what are the skills that Digital Moment focuses on that you guys feel that are non-negotiable almost, that kids need these certain skills once they get into that marketplace? I mean, maybe kind of reflecting a little bit about on your own journey. It sounds like you found a place where you want to help students gain those skills that maybe weren't available to you at a time in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there are obviously hard skills that we talk about and kind of the technical side of it, but it's really much broader than that. And when we're talking about digital literacy today, I think it's a lot of these more intangible things. So when I think about even before what skills, it's sort of like, what do we want people to feel? And we want people to feel empowered. We want people to feel empowered to be able to build, to be able to create, to be able to challenge, to be able to feel that they're, quote unquote, in the driver's seat of their life. And now our lives are so integral and intertwined in that technology, from the way we work, live, and play. And now I would say with AI, it's everywhere. It's everywhere all at once. And how are we making sure that people do feel empowered and not afraid, and don't feel the things that I felt, which was, vulnerable. Like you said, you had to find someone who could do this. If you don't really know the mechanics of it, how can you evaluate who's building for you? How can you feel that, you're not helpless in all of this? So we focus a lot on building sort of durable skills, I guess we would call them, that are quite important around persistence. So one of the things that we look at when we evaluate is the willingness to persist. So how can we help build confidence in young people so that they're willing to continue? Because you're going to fail over and over and over again. And at least in very structured education environments, and certainly in the setting I came from, where, you're a chartered accountant, shouldn't get it wrong. Numbers are a certain way. Like you're not supposed to make errors over and over again. But every entrepreneur will tell you they just fail forward and fail forward and fail forward. And you're constantly trying to figure out how to pivot and change. And that takes immense amounts of confidence. And so we're trying to build up that, particularly for marginalized, underrepresented groups, for young women and girls who don't see someone like themselves, who don't have networks and people who come from those backgrounds. How do we kind of build those skills? Critical thinking is at the core. I think everyone's talking about this risk of losing our critical thinking skills as we start to depend more on answers from AI systems. So how are young people actually critically thinking about the information they're reading, they're receiving? Why are they being shown certain things? Are they controlling their environment, or is that in control of them? Resilience, adaptability. We all know, as you said, quite honestly, I don't think many people can predict where this is all going to end up at this point. We just know we're on this jet. And like you said at the beginning, there's no other option. It's not going to stop. It's not going to disappear. We can't just say, wait for us to catch up. It's moving on its own. It's an organic entity now. And so how do we really prepare people for that uncertainty and still keep a level of optimism and fun and play, and make them want to see the opportunities that we hope this major transformation will enable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was talking with educators and, some thought leaders as well about, like, where do we start this process, from a school, an in-class school, foundation, like, and it's funny that they're always this idea that we're not thinking, like if we introduce AI, thinking stops, and the machine will tell me what to do, right? And I kind of question that a little bit, that if you're using AI, like, I have to think when I use it, right? Because your prompts and what you want at the end, you got to know, right? It's not like I can just say, okay, write me an essay about Macbeth. Go ahead. I need 500 words. I mean, it will do that, but that's not really the orientation, I don't think. And that critical thinking has to be embedded within AI to get what you want in the end, or it's just, somebody else's stuff. Can you maybe drill down a little bit more on critical thinking? Because I know that is probably one of the key, and critical thinking also embeds a whole bunch of other skills within it. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think I know for the education systems, and I don't have to be the teacher in the classroom, and I really empathize with, where they are and what they're facing, and not even with AI. I mean, starting with the smartphone, a student can challenge you and Google something and all of this very easily. And so I think the role that educators play is shifting and changing, whether that's a teacher in a classroom or an educator in a different kind of environment, and moving toward facilitating and mentoring. And so when it comes to critical thinking, exactly what you're saying, and this is where, if we just kind of say to young people, don't use ChatGPT, don't cheat, we don't want to talk about it. All we want to do is find every way to say we're going to verify that you didn't cheat on your homework. We're really avoiding something that we can't, we can't avoid it. We're trying to avoid something that is real, and we're actually not preparing people. So if we're not educating people about that world and the risks of not critically thinking about what's being shared back in those tools, we're not actually doing them any service. They're going to be going out past, high school, even, never mind secondary or post-secondary. They're going to be going out into the world, and they're going to be going into jobs where they're going to be asked to be using these tools. They're going to be asked how they would use these tools, how they would evaluate them, how they would determine if they're going to trust them or not. And they're going to need to optimize them and be efficient with them. So if we're not trialing that out at a younger age, we're not doing our job. And so, coming to your point, those of us who are very old now probably and remember going and writing essays by getting books out of the library and actually forming our thoughts while we were reading all of these books and having to write an essay, feels like very ancient times now. But one of the things I say that, while you're doing that, while you're going through what felt like very mundane at times, you're actually forming your thoughts, right? You're actually thinking through what you feel about a book, whether you agree or disagree with that author. And now you've gone and read another source and heard another side of the story, perhaps. And you're weighing out all those options, and you're looking at the credibility of these people, and you're actually forming where you sit. And I think the worry for me is that if we're not having young people maybe look at what comes out of the system, compare it to verifiable information. And I have sat with educators in a conference in UNESCO where one of the assignments was read the book and ask ChatGPT to tell you the answer. And we want you to compare the difference. And I think there are smart and unique ways that you can get them to use the tools to be able to do that. And then, to your point, I don't think any of us can say we aren't using these tools to start brainstorming about something. It's about prompting. It's about verifying the information. It's about getting better at your questions. And this is a skill and a muscle that will develop. And so I think we should really encourage young people to go and look at a subject they know really well. Lots of kids play sports. Go and start asking ChatGPT to tell you about something you know really well. And through that experience, you're going to start to see the holes and the gaps and realize that this isn't just to be taken at face value, because sometimes the way, the system responds very confidently. I think that usually you hear an answer that cannot have too much substance, but man, does it sound like it really knows what it's talking about. And so young people will start to see that for themselves as they have access to try and learn and discuss and, in their classroom, in these environments with, teachers who are trying to support them.
Yeah, totally. I heard this really cool stat too from ChatGPT put out their report recently, and they said that close to 75% now of searches are for non-work related searches, right? So it's not really about using it as a academic crutch, or it's starting to shift dramatically towards non-work related searches, which I found pretty fascinating, that we're harping on this idea that it's a cheat machine, but it's, it's not being used that way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't doubt that stat. I mean, what I have at least heard, in being over 40, I've heard that, us over 40 are using it more like Google for information to kind of synthesize and summarize. And younger people, and I do think we need to think about this, and this is why we can't just be assuming it's a cheating tool. That's not what it's for. They're using it to have conversations, to do things with their personal life. They're doing it in all sorts of ways that, as a society, it's like we're all on the bus and we're flying down the road, and young people are on it with us. And I think as opposed to like previous, when you compare it to other industrial revolutions or big technological advances, even, young people weren't necessarily in the mix so closely as they are right now. And so I think that's where we actually need to be putting our attention, and actually having conversations at the kitchen table with our kids to learn more about what they're doing with these tools and what they're relying on it for and how they're using them. Because it is, I think, much more outside of kind of a work type tool than people realize. And there's
Right.
positives and consequences to that as well.
Totally. How do we get home and school at the table listening to those conversations? Because, I mean, right now here in Quebec, we're kind of keeping AI away, directly from kids in classrooms, age restrictions, privacy, like all of those issues that are there. How do we start having those conversations with kids from the home perspective and from the school perspective, and start listening to what their ideas are about?
Yeah, I think so. This is exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, as an organization, we are really trying to support the school system so they're willing and open to have those conversations. And yes, there's a risk of not just bringing anything into the classroom, and there's privacy and kind of, all the ethical concerns. But at the same time, you can be having conversations and discussions about technology without even touching technology as a starting point. And parents are also feeling overwhelmed in all of this. And so how do we start to create maybe more inclusive environments where those kind of conversations and discussions can happen, and we can actually hear directly from young people what they think? And, we're quite used to systems being kind of taking the creative side out of us. As you go through school and you're told to, stay in the box and like, no, focus on this and don't go outside of the rules and all of this. And actually over time, all of our creative and innovative ideas are kind of pushed aside because we're supposed to just do what we're told to do, whether that's at work or at school to some extent. So I always like to think like of young people as actually they are entrepreneurs and innovators by nature, and we're kind of pushing them into a box as they get older. And so through, at least for example, our social innovation lab program, we want it to feel as not like school as possible. So we want them to feel like they can build the tool they want to build. We're there to mentor them and sort of share with them how they could integrate technology into the problem they're trying to solve, but center it around something that they care about, and give them the autonomy to say, like, this is where we want to focus, and listen to what they think as well. And I think there's so many creative ways that the school systems, the government could come in and support that infrastructure to be able to have parents also be involved in that process. So we're also talking about that right now, about, a family guide or some sort of thing to just start conversations going. For example, for us, one of the big things is polarization that's being created through social media is something we all really now are much more aware of. We're all living in these bubbles and these echo chambers, and we don't get to ever meet people on the other side or the other viewpoint, and you dehumanize them. And so how do we easily create ways to for people to have those conversations? And you don't even need to be bringing a tool into the room. Everybody knows what they can imagine what that scenario is like and have an honest conversation about it.
Absolutely. I totally am with you too on that social media part. I sometimes just feel we kind of missed the boat on that, and we're seeing the repercussions now, and and the kids that sit in front of us in class, that they're more anxious. They're more, just feeling the weight of the world. And I'm not saying that the world doesn't have a lot of weight to it right now. It does. But we kind of missed that boat on social media and the power that it was going to have on our youngest learners. And we're kind of seeing that repercussion. And I'm just hoping that we don't make that same mistake again with AI, because like you said, it's another tipping point, right? I mean, social media was a tipping point for our youth. And now we have another tipping point really close together. And are we having those conversations? And I know that you're very involved with those conversations that are happening at many different levels. Where are we at here in Quebec with those conversations about, ethical use, letting kids explore AI, but with, a little bit of safeguard around it, so that we're not doing what we did last time, where we were just like giving them, a car and said, go ahead, drive. No, you don't need a seatbelt. Just go ahead, drive. Like, are we thinking about how we're going to kind of make sure that we put those safeguards in place to protect our future generations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the analogy and the comparison is completely on point. And this is, what is on all of our minds who are talking to different levels of government institutions and sort of public civil society around what not to do this time. And I think in our learnings of, social media, and I think and the real mistake was calling a smartphone a phone, because it's not a phone. It's a complete access to anything on the web, the dark web, you name it, whatever apps, and I don't really truly think anyone had any idea what they were introducing young people to. So I feel for people who had kids during that period of time, and absolutely for young people who grew up with, and are now very deeply ingrained in these kind of social media systems. And as you said, the repercussions and outcomes of that. So if there's not a better moment to be very hyper aware that we cannot let that happen again, it is now. And so what we're talking about, with different levels of government, and obviously we're national, and in Canada, it's a complex environment. So when I was in the UK in 2012, the National Ministry of Education introduced computer science from K to 12 across the country. And at least from a policy perspective, they could do that overnight for every child in the country. And here, we're trying to get to a place, and for us right now, we're really pushing for a national AI framework agenda that every province would sign up to say, look, it shouldn't matter. And as a parent and a citizen of Canada, it shouldn't matter if I'm in rural Quebec, downtown Vancouver, Prince Edward Island, or Edmonton. Like, we should assume that all of our children are getting the same access to opportunity and being safely protected in the same way, because it's not different from reading and writing. And now, obviously, those kind of skills have been around a long time, so they're already being taught across the country at the same level. And so this is where it all lies, in this divide of what's going to happen. And you can imagine what's going to happen. Private schools are going to get it. Companies are going to go in, and private schools are going to pay, and schools on the public system are going to be strained and suffer unless government steps in. And so it's really up to government, in my opinion, and not to even want or leave it up to the market. This is not this is a public, in my right, human rights issue, to be honest, that every young person needs to have the same opportunity here and the same education to protect themselves, and their families need to know this. The government needs to step up and to really fund what it's going to take to give our educators time off and support to go to PD trainings like we provide. And right now we have a federal grant from Ministry of Innovation through a program called CanCode that I know you're quite familiar with. But even with those programs, we need partnership and collaboration with the ministries of education in every province and territory to want to say, let's do this together. I think it's far too much to ask teachers to keep up on their own. Even for us who are running these organizations, we can barely, it takes a lot, and we collaborate with all of our other CanCode partners and many of us across the country and internationally to bring together ideas and thoughts and content and all of that. So, I think it is government's job to do something. Today is the last day of a public call from the ministry, Solomon's office of Minister of AI, asking the public about what should be done. So I think efforts are being made, but it's up to all of us who can speak on behalf of citizens to not take our foot off the gas on pressuring them to own this.
Absolutely. I'm on that. I'm in that car with you, Indra. I mean, I think that if there isn't some kind of framework that covers all of, and Canada is a weird place, right? Where we've allocated provincial education. They control education provincially, but we're all in the same boat here, as you said, so it has to be some kind of framework where we all agree with. And I was at a conference yesterday and we were talking about that exact thing, that we're all kind of doing our own thing instead of looking globally at it. Kids are kids, students are students, schools are schools. I mean, this is a universal, as you said, thing that's there. And if we don't address it that way, I think that it's going to be this patchwork again, which never tends to work very well.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're all humans who care about the young people in our lives and our communities and our country. So we all want what's best for them. So I think that's actually coming together and saying, as you said, there are ways to do this where we're not all in silos out there creating our own and recreating. And, there's also, I think about efficiency and use of funds and all of this as well. And so, let's put our brains together across the country, and people who are in the decision-making seats say, yes, I want to meet all of us and say, here is a starting point. It's just, we have to start somewhere, and we don't have time on our side to, as you said, education moves very slowly. Human beings are, and I don't think, as you mentioned rightly at the beginning, I think we're meant to move this fast, but, we have to do something to not let it overtake us. And so I think education needs to get a bit uncomfortable in saying we're going to do things differently than we have in the past.
Totally. I love that. Well, this has been fascinating. I think that the thoughtfulness of your ideas and how you present them is something that we need to start talking about. I know it's uncomfortable, but I think right now is a time for disruption in a way, because we see, well, we don't really know, but we see what the history has taught us, and that we're kind of heading in that same direction again. And it's a bit nerve-wracking. And I think you're right. A slow change just won't do it. And for change to happen, you have to be disruptive. I mean, it has to be. You got to kind of break it all down and rebuild a little bit. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think just because of sort of, when people think about tech and big tech and some of the failures we feel maybe that have happened, and the word disruption is now, oh no, we don't, that sounds like really negative per se, but it doesn't have to be. And so when we look at the Coke Club model that started in the UK, and I will speak to that beautiful story and the women who were behind it, the founder of Coke Club, they saw a problem. They said, we are young tech professionals. We have people who have these skills. They're not being taught in schools. We're going to create an easy way to match schools and volunteers, and we're just going to send people into those schools, and they're just going to start teaching it for free. It was all around Scratch, first coming out of MIT. And that's when the movement really began, about 15 years ago, I guess now, almost. And that was disruptive, right? That was not a thing that existed. And it was social innovation and social disruption for the positive. So I think we do need to think about what are the things we can do to just disrupt how things have been done, but for good. And I think that's what we're teaching young people when we take them into our labs. We're like, this problem's existed for 50 years, food insecurity, whatever it is they care about. clearly the things we've been doing aren't meeting the mark. We're not solving it with the same sort of ideas. So they're beautiful young people who can think outside the box and if you give them a chance, they're going to come up with wild and crazy ideas. And usually wild and crazy ideas lead to disruptive change that can be positive. So I think that's really important.
I love that. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you. Man, so much to think about. So many more conversations to be had. I really hope that we can hop on here again one time and continue this conversation, because I think if we're not talking about it, and the conversations are needing to be had, and I hope the listeners out there can appreciate some of what we're talking about. And we're thinking about kids, we're thinking about their future and empowering them for the future. And I think that Digital Moment is a big key to helping here in Quebec and across Canada. So Indra, thanks so much for your beautiful insights. I think that they were so well explained and illustrated. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you so much. And happy to come again, and hopefully we'll have made good progress by then.
Right on. We got a date.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.